me the nod. Welcome to Sacristo-nory. Today's story is Cold Paws, Warm Hand. Far away, all alone in the land of snow and ice, lived a large polar bear who was always cold. His name was Cold Paws. When he was young, Cold Paws tried to play with the other animals, but he was too big for their games and no one wanted to play with him. Soon he started to feel cold inside. Poor Cold Paws, he was very lonely and he sat on his own and he shivered. Time passed slowly for Cold Paws. The only thing that kept him company was a silver flute, which he played each day to forget his troubles. Also, in the land of snow and ice, there lived a little girl called Hannah. One day, as Hannah was walking through the forest, she heard some beautiful music. She felt as if the gentle notes were stroking her ears. The people in the village said that no one lived across the snowy plains except Cold Paws, a bear so huge and so cold that if you touched him, you would turn to ice. But as she closed her eyes in bed that night, all Hannah could think of was the beautiful music. She knew she would have to follow it. The next day, Hannah took the same path through the snow, and again she heard the magical music drawing her closer. It led her out of the great forest, across the snowy plains, and right up to a large iceberg. Hannah crept towards the iceberg and peered around the corner. Right there in front of her was a huge polar bear with a soft, gentle smile. He was playing a silver flute. Hannah could not believe her eyes. She crouched down out of sight and listened until the air fell silent around her. Brrr, the polar bear shivered. His whole body shook and the snow beneath Hannah's boots trembled. Now Hannah knew how miserable it was to feel very cold, so without thinking she took off her scarf, stepped forward and placed it right in front of the big polar bear. Hannah held her breath. Very slowly the polar bear picked up the red woolly scarf and tied it under his big furry chin. He nodded his large heavy head and Hannah smiled. That night, as the stars lit up the sky, Cold Paws thought how lonely his life had become. He pulled the red scarf closer around his neck, but he still felt cold inside. He shivered. On the other side of the forest, Hannah lay in her warm bed and thought about the cold polar bear. The next day, Hannah ran back through the forest, across the snowy plains and up to the iceberg. Let's do some star jumps to warm you up, she said. Cold Paws looked confused and rubbed his ears. Something about this little girl made him feel better, so he lifted his heavy legs and did his best to jump up and down. Hannah laughed and Cold Paws smiled. I have another idea, said Hannah, and she ran off towards the village. As Cold Paws waited, the sunlight faded and the snow fell steadily through the silence. Cold Paws blew on his polar bear paws. He had never had such a special day, but he still felt a little cold inside. He shivered. When Hannah came back, she held out a steaming mug of hot chocolate. This is for you, she said. Cold Paws took the mud in his soft paws and smelt the sweet chocolate. He took a large gulp and licked the chocolate off his nose. He had never tasted anything so delicious, and now he only felt a tiny bit cold inside. I have to go home now, said Hannah. I can't think of any other way to warm you up, but we can still play together every day. Hannah reached out her arms as wide as she could and gave Cold Paws a very big hug. Cold Paws closed his eyes, and as he did so, a wonderful thing happened. The cold feeling inside disappeared, and instead he felt a warm glow all over. Now that he had a friend, Cold Paws didn't feel cold anymore. The end.